Shark Tank Success Story, brought to you by the Controllers Council. My name is Neil Brown, Executive Director of the Controllers Council. And before we get started, we have just a couple of housekeeping items. After the discussion, we'll have audience Q&A. So attendees, please submit your questions via the GoToWebinar control panel. We will get to as many as possible in the hour. Now, in answer to a frequent question, you will receive a link to this webcast via email in the next 24 hours, so no need to take copious notes. Now, a word about our sponsor, TripActions, one of the fastest growing and the default for corporate travel and spend management as the leading cloud-based T&E platform that combines industry-leading technology with best-in-class travel agency service, trusted by travel managers and finance teams alike at more than 5,000 companies globally. TripActions.com. So with that, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Thomas Long is Senior Manager Product at TripActions. And Jurie Victor is Director of Finance and Accounting at Spikeball of Shark Tank fame. Thomas, take it away.
All right, yeah, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for jumping on this Thursday. As was mentioned, I'm Thomas Long. I'm kind of the Senior Product Marketing Manager on the TripActions Liquid side of the company. So as a whole, TripActions, we have kind of whole travel side of the company as well as corporate card and spend management platform that Yuri uses over at Spikeball, and I've been kind of managing a lot of the product and product marketing for that. And Yuri, yeah, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Spikeball and your role there.
Sure. Thanks, Thomas, for having me. Neil, thanks for the introduction. So I'm Jurie Victor. I am the head of finance and accounting. Not the biggest accounting team that we have over there, about 4 full-time people and like 2 or 3 part-time people helping us in the finance department. Spikeball from 2015 on Shark Tank kind of went through its meteoric rise in popularity, as I assure everyone on this call might be aware of and have seen Spikeball somewhere, seen someone play or have played it themselves. So yeah, for me, I was pretty much introduced to Spikeball through outsourced accounting firm that I worked for and started on the Spikeball account. A year later, I became the full-time all hands 360 bookkeeper, accountant, and the whole kind of thing. From there on out, the scaling really started, and we went from 6-7 full-time employees in 2015 to almost, I think, over 50 now, or 52 full-time employees in a very short period of time. So that type of scaling comes with its own challenges, which I'm sure we'll dig into some of it today.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's always cool talking to you, Yuri, because I love Spikeball. I kind of said we play, here in here in the Bay Area. But I'm curious about more of your background. Kind of where are you from? Kind of what led you to a career in finance, and what led you to end up at Spikeball from there? It'd be great to kind of hear that story.
That's okay. Well, long story short, after I graduated university in 2008, and I kind of aged myself a little bit there, I didn't have an accounting degree initially. After that, I went to South Korea. I taught some English, made some friends, traveled a lot more after that in China and South America and a lot in Asia, and kind of just lived life and built some experience. But along the way, I kind of got interested in finance and financial markets, something that I never really had an interest in or thought that I had a knack for. But somewhere along the line, I kind of picked that up, and reading and self-teaching and educating myself in a lot of technical terms in economics and finance. And then I went back to school in South Africa, and I started my accounting degree a few years after I kind of got into it a little bit, finished my accounting degree, really loved it. And I think when you're older and you go back to school, you're way more committed, I think, or you have a little bit of a better sense of where all of the things that you're learning are fitting in real life. So when I settled in Chicago, I applied for a job at this kind of startup accounting firm for startup companies, specifically in the Chicago area. There's a huge tech hub kind of incubator and community there, entrepreneurial community in Chicago. And that's where I started as a kind of outsourced accountant and starting kind of dipping my feet in the industry. And it was just kind of by happenstance that I ended up on the Spikeball account as well after their Shark Tank appearance. And, you know, from there on out, it's kind of, you know, the baptism of fire, and you sink or swim. And luckily, I kind of think I did a pretty decent job and understand, you know, what needed to be done to help Spikeball in the best way I could. After about a year and a half, Spikeball identified the need to bring the finance role in-house, just due to kind of the sheer volume. It just made sense to them. And instead of going to find someone else to do it, they'd rather have someone who has done it and know how the systems work and what's required. So they hired me full-time in-house. And that's kind of where then I had to wear a different level of a hat and kind of take leadership and ownership in the finance function and identify where the roadblocks might come down the line if things kept on growing the way that they did. So soon after my full-time hire as the head of finance at Spikeball, I started looking into what is next for Spikeball from an infrastructure standpoint. You know, you had your standard kind of QuickBooks and your order fulfillment system, your inventory system doing separate things. And we needed an ERP system. We needed to bring something in scale. And that's kind of where the conversation really started and took off for Spikeball is, hey, it's startup, but there's some traction here. And when do we get to scale up? And what does that look like? And I was very fortunate that they trusted in what I brought to the table at that time to say, well, how about you design how you want it to look?
Yeah.
And you drive from the end result, reverse engineer into the operations, and we build the operation side then so that you get the result that you need. And kind of that was our approach. And with that, of course, the implementation, anyone who's been through an implementation before of an ERP system where you rip and replace, it's tough. It's hard. It takes time. But once you're through it and you did it the right way, it really pays off. And of course, with that comes, hey, how do we solve this? And what is our next problem? And as you kind of go through this, all the pieces start fitting in together, and you kind of, you created, like I said, a quilt, the one your grandma used to make out of the old blankets and t-shirts, where you kind of put these pieces together. And once you put enough pieces together and you solve enough problems, you get a nice warm blanket that everyone can sit under. And, you know, we're currently 20 days into our year. And for the first time ever, we are right on the cusp of closing our financial year and handing over our financials to our auditors, which have never happened before. I don't think Spikeball has ever closed their year fully and be able to hand over their financials to a third party within a quarter. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there who kind of go through the same thing, especially in that startup industry when there's so many moving parts and not always the infrastructure to do it. So that was a very long-winded answer, but I hope that kind of covers a few things and can branch off of some of that.
Oh no, yeah, I mean that covers a ton. It's interesting to hear the story, and it kind of leads us perfectly into the next question, which is basically, you know, you talk through what it's like, what it's been like working at Spikeball for a while, but I'm curious how the finance team has changed in terms of like